Story 1. The night of the fight MMA, I found out discovering my wife's affair with my rival. I fought with all my might and defeated my opponent. Seldom, if ever, has a man ever found themselves in the unique circumstance I find myself in. My name is Tab Munroe, and I recently found out my darling wife of 3 years Cassandra has been cheating on me for the better part of 7 months with her ex-boyfriend Jared Emon. They have no idea I know they are sleeping with each other. But that's not the unique circumstance. The fact that I'm scheduled to fight him in a month and a half is. You see, I'm an aspiring mixed martial artist looking to break into the big leagues. I'm 26 years old with a record of 14-0-1. The one no contest was when, accidentally, I gouged a guy who had kicked me in the groin 3 times in a fight, but the ref didn't call a foul. If you ask me, that fight was fixed, but I digress. I fight on the local circuit here in NYC, but at this upcoming Pro-Am event, some of the heavy hitters of the combat sports world will be there scouting out talent to potentially give contracts to. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start from the beginning. I met Cass 4 years ago when I was just starting out in the sport at an athletics convention at the JAV, that's the Jacob Javits Center for non-New York folk. I was there helping promote my MMA gym, and Cass was there doing the same for her fitness gym, where she works as a personal trainer. To say that Cass is flawless would be an understatement. She's got the body of an Olympic swimmer while still having all of the curves a man would appreciate. Long, jet black hair down to the small of her back and these slanted, deep blue eyes. She's a spellbinding woman who turns heads at any chance, and here she was in the booth across from my gyms, decked out in full gym wear, literally oozing sexuality. Clearly not intended, but with a body like hers it comes with the territory. She's got it, and she knows how to flaunt it. So, the convention lasts 2 weeks, and it wasn't until the start of the second that I mustered the courage to start small talk with her. I mean, our booths were so close you could literally hear the conversations being had from both groups regardless. So in between trying to convince passersby to sign up, we chit-chat and found out we had a lot in common. As the week progressed, we'd end up going on lunch together a couple days, and a couple of the boys started egging me on to ask her out. It was pretty clear she was interested, so by that Thursday, I asked her on a date. She graciously said yes, or more specifically said, "It's about time, slowpoke." So, that Saturday, we went out for dinner and dancing, and it pretty much followed the formula from there. After 10 months of dating, I popped the question, and she again said yes. 2 months later she was my wife. And for 3 years we lived in what I thought was a happy marriage. I'd learn over the course of being with her that she was a huge MMA fan. And not a casual fan, either. The moment she named Den Henderson vs. Wanderlei Silva's fight in Pride FC as one of her top 5, I knew I had a keeper. Again, or so I thought. So, what do I know about Jared Emon? Well, I know he's the guy who came before me. Like myself, he's an aspiring fighter. Unlike me, he's a smug, pompous asshole. Think Conor McGregor and Colby Covington after doing the Dragon Ball Z fusion dance, that's the level of asshole this guy is. They were apparently college sweethearts, both attending St. John's University. I went to NYU. From the info I gathered, he broke up with her once he thought his fight career was going to take off, which was roughly 5 months before Cass and I started dating. So, how does this asshole interject himself into my marriage? Turns out he reached out to her 8 months ago looking to get back into her good graces. She informed him she was now married, to which he said, "And I should you not, so what? You're still my girl until I say otherwise." The part that stung the most reading that initial text chain was that she didn't even push back from it. It didn't take long for things to escalate between the two of them. Within a month of him contacting her, they were shacking up at his place. And I was completely oblivious to this as I trusted Cass implicitly. She never gave me reason to suspect she was cheating. She never denied me affection. She never hid her phone. She never showed any of the telltale signs of cheating. So how did I find out she was cheating on me? Complete and total chance. Jared trains at what I guess you could call our rival gym. Since we're in the same area, only 8 miles apart, oftentimes fighters from his gym and my gym will compete against each other in local tournaments. One of the guys I trained with came to me one day and asked was the fitness gym Cass worked at doing some kind of cross-promotion with Jared's gym, cause he always saw her car in their parking lot, and oftentimes would see her exiting the gym alongside of Jared. This guy lives only a few blocks from Jared's gym, but travels the 8 miles to our gym because, to be honest, our gym is just better, but I digress. I thanked him, and decided to do my own investigative work the next day. That morning before she headed out to work, I asked her if she had plans after, and she said she was just going hang with some of the girls, have a few drinks and maybe come home. Sounds simple enough. When she left, seeing as I was off for my day job that day, I decided to tail her just to quell my curiosity. She went to her gym and worked with about 4 clients. Around the time she had and the other trainer she works with left, she didn't go with them. Nope, she got in her car and drove 5 miles the other direction, to Jared's gym. By this time, my stomach was in knots, but I still held out hope. Maybe there was a logical explanation for her being there. Well, I found out the explanation 23 minutes later, as she walked out of the gym side by side with Jared. They proceeded to get in her car, and the moment they were situated, they did a bit of tongue wrestling before driving away. I wasn't too much shot to take my phone out and record or take pics of what I was seeing, but I managed to catch myself enough to start my car and tail them to their next destination, which happened to be Jared's apartment building. It was an old brownstone, and I parked a block down and watched heat broken heart as my lovely wife followed Jared into the building. Maybe it's the martial artist in me, but at that moment I switched from sadness to complete indifference. It wasn't one of those scenarios where the guy laments and wonders, what did I do wrong? I knew I did nothing wrong. I knew this was all her. And I knew at that moment, I wanted to get even. I drove back to our apartment and began my plan, to collect enough necessary evidence to nail Cass to the wall, divorce her and leave her reeling. Enter my Uncle Louis, former NYPD of 30 years now moonlighting as a private investigator. The dude is a modern-day Columbo. He's the first person I called when I returned home, and I laid everything on the table. He gave me his apologies for witnessing the death of my marriage, but commended me for holding it together and not doing something stupid. I didn't even have to ask him, as he said he'd stop by tomorrow and give me the rundown on a surveillance plan to get as much dirt as possible. And get dirt he did. I don't know what kind of magic Uncle Louis does or what kind of strings he can pull to get the type of access he can get, but within a month of D-Day, he provided me with mountains of evidence, including the texts I mentioned before. I pretty much had all of the evidence needed to file for divorce under the grounds of adultery, which would disqualify Cass from any spousal support. But then, a different opportunity arose. The owner of my gym brought all of us in and announced he'd sign up to have the gym represented in a major pro-am event, and he needed 3 fighters willing to take on fighter from Jared's gym. I jumped at the chance, and naturally when he showed us who from the other gym was willing to compete, I chose Jared as my opponent. Now I of course had to keep my reasoning under wraps, because if anyone found out they'd never let me fight him, but this coincided with my plan nicely. The next day, I met with a divorce lawyer my uncle highly recommended. I provided all of the necessary evidence, and my lawyer Mr. Greenlee said, this is going to be a cut and dry case. The only question is where and when do you want her served? I gave him the date and the place, the day of the event, at the venue it was taking place, in a month and a half. He instructed me over the next month to get my ducks in a row, separate any joint accounts and decide what shared assets if any I'd want. He also said to be prepared for if she decided to fight the divorce, to which I told him I could guarantee she wouldn't. So cue the night of the fight. I'd spent the last 5 weeks training, and when I wasn't training or working my day job, I was doing as Mr. Greenlee said. The night of the fight, I knew Cass would be in attendance. She always attended my fights. I didn't, however, tell her who my opponent was. And I'd learned through text and call logs that though she told Jared she was married, she never told him who she was married to, so he had no idea he was about to step in the cage with her STBXH. You'd figure the hour leading up to the fight I'd be a ball of nerves, but it was actually the calmest I'd ever been before a fight. This chilling sense of purpose washed over me to the point where even my team were taken aback at how calm I was. Normally I like to get myself amped up, but not tonight. I knew I was taking a huge risk, but it was a risk I was willing to take. When the knock on the door happened that I was up, I stood up without uttering a word and followed my coach and trainers out of the locker room. Jared was announced first and he did his walk out to the cage. From the gorilla position I had a good view of where Cass was sitting, and what she did pretty much sealed the deal, blowing the asshole a kiss as he did that gun signs her direction. So he's in the cage doing his warm-ups, and they announce my name as his opponent. What happened next is one of the most priceless moments I'll ever remember. Cass went completely pale, the look of pure dread on her face evident. As I followed my team out to the cage, she held her hands to her mouth in shock, having had no idea I'd be Jared's opponent. As we walked with her proximity in the stands, I just glanced her direction with what could best be described as a deaf stare. I think it was at that moment, that one look I gave her told her everything about how this night was going to end. The bell rings and the fight starts. As I expected, Jared comes out guns blazing. I knew from studying film on him he's a fast starter and likes to overwhelm his opponents with lots of strikes. Physically, Jared and I were almost identical in stats. About the same height, same weight, and I had a 2-inch reach advantage. What differed between us is skill sets. Jared was a brawler who relied on shock and awe, whereas I'm what you'd call a classic point fighter, measuring distance and timing to land a strike at the perfect moment. Also differing between us was our grappling. Jared had some wrestling skill from his days at SJU, as did I from NYU, but I was also a BBJ purple belt. To my knowledge, Jared had no formal BJJ rank. So after a good 2 minutes of Jared trying to overwhelm me, I key onto the fact that he likes to load his left foot on the backside before throwing his hook. I waited for him to set it up again, and stepped through with my right foot to get ahead of his punch, before his shoulder even turned, bang. I hit him flush with a shot to the rib. There's 2 types of sounds a shot like that makes: the load, slapping sound that gets the crowd amped because it sounds brutal, or the thunk sound that's only heard by the 3 people in the ring, but felt by the guy getting hit. The later is what you want, 'cause that means the impact went deep into the muscle tissue. Those shots hurt, and sure enough Jared jumped back like he'd been stabbed and did his best to act as if it didn't hurt, but the grimace on his face, and on the ref's face, told me another story. So for the rest of the first round, we have a couple exchanges of flurries, but the initial tidal wave Jared tried to crash on me got stopped with that body shot. The round ends and I glance over Cass' direction. Surprisingly, she's still in the stands with a look for fear and concern on her face. I wasn't sure what it was about, me getting hurt, Jared getting hurt, me knowing about her affair with him. All I knew was she was glued to her seat, which is just what I wanted. In my corner, my coach praises me for the body shot and tells me he wants more of the same in the next round. As I look across the cage at Jared, I could see him trying to figure me out, wondering why he couldn't get a beat on my emotions. It was like he was staring at some sort of specter. The bell sounds and round 2 begins. This time, Jared's not as aggressive, but it didn't matter. He comes at me trying to set something up with his jab, pointing at me with his right, then plants that back left foot again for his right hook. He clearly didn't learn his lesson the first time, as I time it and this time step back on my left so his hook hits nothing but air. Before he can reset his stand, I step forward on my right foot again, swing my left hip and crack him with a left body kick on the same side I hit him in the ribs in round 1. Again, the shot sunk deep into the sinew, leaving a bright red welt on his side. This time, the crowd let out a collective as the shot left Jared up on his tiptoes before he retreated back a few steps. Under normal circumstances I'd pounce when my opponent is hurt. Not this time. I wanted to savor this. It was after this shot that I figured Jared realized this wasn't a normal fight. I could see the confusion in his eyes as if to say, who the fuck is this guy? I just stood in my stance, taking a slight moment to glance over in Cass' direction. When her eyes met mine I could see genuine fear in them. Jared glanced over slightly to see the same thing, and I think that's the moment it dawned on him why I was, and what he was locked in this cage for 2 more rounds with. His demeanor completely changed. Whereas in round 1 he came out guns blazing looking for the kill, he suddenly realized he was the gazelle, and I was the tiger toying with its meal. Jared stepped in to try and score a 2-2-1 combo, but I stepped to the side of the third shot and delivered a 3, that's a right hook by the way, that wobbled him. The only thing that kept him standing was the cage. Even the ref realized at this point I wasn't trying to win, I was trying to make an example of him, as again, I didn't follow up. I just stood in my stance and waited for Jared's next advance. The ref took a moment to allow Jared to reset and gave me a reprimand to keep the action going. I simply nodded, got my guard back up and waited for the ref to tell us to engage. When he did, I guess it was either pride or embarrassment that spurned Jared's next move. He threw a 1-2 to close distance, and initiated an over-under clinch when he got close. As we jostled for position he said to me, "Dude, what's your problem?" I didn't answer back, I simply pummeled out from his over-under into a body lock, popped my hips and delivered a suplex that would have made my old wrestling coach bust a nut. All I saw was elbows and feet go sailing over my head before hearing the sound of Jared's body hit the mat with a thud. Thankfully for him, the bell sounded and round 2 came to an end. Jared scrambled back to his corner, and I could see him talking to his trainers and coach with a look of dread on his face. Meanwhile in my corner, my coach is in my grill screaming about not showing off. Next time you get him reeling, finish the fucking fight. What are you doing, Tab? I look my coach in the eye and simple utter the words to him, that asshole is fucking my wife. There was a lot of dread in that arena, because my coach took a step back and said, oh, shit. Are you fucking serious? I just looked forward in Jared's direction with a look of stone-cold stoicism in my face. Devoid of emotion, this time I didn't even bother looking toward Cass. This was going to be where I send my message. The bell for round 3 sounds, and we both take the center of the cage. Bruce Lee is widely considered the godfather of MMA, on the account that the style he pioneered, Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist, uses the same principles of MMA. Take what works for you, discard what doesn't, make it uniquely your own. It gets its name from using offense as defense. When a punch is thrown at you, instinct tells you to defend. To block. In JKD, you're trained to do the opposite. You literally beat their punch, to the punch, with a punch. Or a kick. Or an eye gouge. Or anything that's going to stop them in their tracks. If this was a street fight, I could have been creative. But this was a sanctioned fight, so I had to keep it legal. Jared started off trying to land a leg kick, but I checked it and returned fire with on of my own towards the leg he chambered from. Hit him on the inside on the leg right on the tendon. Those shits hurt like a bitch. He immediately stepped back and switched stance to protect that leg. He tried to step forward with jab/straight combo, but I parried the jab like it was leaf falling from a tree, then met his left straight with my right elbow. It's an unorthodox way of blocking a strike perfected in the US penitentiary system in a fighting style called 52 blocks. It can break the hand of the guy throwing the punch. Jared let out an audible yelp when his knuckles met the point of my right elbow. There's a moment in a fight when you witness the will of your opponent fade. They emotionally concede defeat before the physical defeat happens. After that parry, that's what I saw in Jared's eyes. It was time to end our dance. Jared loaded off his back right foot this time, and chambered his left leg for a high kick. He was trying to swing for the fences as he clearly realized he was losing on points, and I clearly outclassed him in skill. I ducked his high kick while shifting to my left foot upon standing up. I transferred that shift to my hips and whipped back around with a picture-perfect right hook gut that landed with a thud. I could feel the impact reverberate through my forearms, it landed so hard. Jared crumbled like stale cookie to his knee as he backed into the cage. I'd already got a warning from the ref about not following up, so this time as Jared reeled to try and catch his breath, I charged in with a full body tackle, pinning him to the cage. Getting a good body look on him again, pinning his elbows to his ribs in my grip, I scoop him off of his knee and with every ounces of strength in me, lift him clean off of his feet and body slam him into the mat. Not a moment after, I move to side control and sink a Darce choke in on him. The Darce choke is one of the most brutal submission holds in the sport. It's called a blood choke, as it reaches its effect from cutting off blood flow to the brain. If held too long, it can kill a man. It also happens to be my favorite submission move. Within 5 seconds, Jared was out like a light, and the ref scrambled to get me to release it. It took all of the fortitude in my soul not to choke the life out of this man, but I'd done what I set out to do. I reclaimed my manhood by making an example of this pompous asshat. As the ring announcer announced me as the victor, and the ref raised my hand, my team entered the cage and celebrated. But I wasn't in a celebratory mood. Cass had made her way to the cage at this point. Under normal circumstances she'd be all over me, showering me with kisses. But this time, she entered with a somber, timid and unsure look on her face. She first looked over to Jared as the medics tended to him, then to me with the most sorrowful look I've ever seen on a human being. It looked as if she was going to walk towards me, but before she could get close I motioned for someone else to enter the cage, good ol' Uncle Louie. In his hand was a manila folder. He stood between Cass and I, looked her dead in the eyes and said in a clear and bold voice, Cassandra Munroe, you've been served this petition for divorce on the grounds of adultery. He handed my now dumbfounded STBXW the folder, pulled out his phone to take a pic denoting she'd been served, turned to me and said, good fight, kid. Call me when you get home. With that he left the cage. Cass was left stunned, looking at the folder in her hand, then back up at me. It looked as if she wanted to say something, but her bottom lip was quivering and she couldn't utter a word. I didn't even bother to look and see what happened next, I just walked past her and out of the cage. My team followed me not soon after. As I said, Seldom does a man get the opportunity to legally put hands on the men his wife is cheating on him with. It's a chance I couldn't resist. Unexpected to me was how much better a fighter I was compared to him, but I was still left with the lingering feeling of why Cass chose to ruin whatever future we had for this guy. Little did I know that night, the fight was far from over. Back in the locker room, I had to come clean with my team about what had happened. For so many months I kept it secret the motivations of agreeing to fight the douchebag, and when I finally revealed it, the reaction was a mixed bag. My training partners and cutmen were all elated, but my coaches, they weren't pleased. Especially my head coach, and owner of the gym I train at, Jared. He chewed me out over what this could potentially do to the gym should it come to light. How this was basically sanctioned assault and battery, and had the city athletic board got wind of it, he could lose his license for allowing me to fight this guy and I could end up in jail. I honestly didn't think that far ahead. After almost an hour of pleading with him, I convinced him that I'd handle it and it'd have no blowback on the gym. He reluctantly told me okay, but mandated that I'd not be taking another fight until after all of the shitstorm of my divorce was settled. This came as a bit of a blow, as sure enough a lot of the scouts in the crowd were in awe of my performance, and I'd learned just days later from Jared's brother Ansar, who manages the books of the gym, told me I had 4 contract offers on the table, 2 of them from the big boys of the MMA industry. He did his due diligence to let them know I was going through personal matters, but we'd speak with them as soon as things had settled. But I'm getting ahead of myself a bit. The ride home is where it really hit me. The adrenaline of the fight faded, and my entire body felt thousands of pounds heavier. The creeping dread of what was to become the next chapter of my life grabbed me by the throat. I had to pull over to the side of the road, to a spot dark enough that no one would see me, and let it all out. And I did. All of the months of festering rage. Everything that I couldn't unleash on Jared or Cass' skulls. I roared. I cursed. I cried. I think it was a full-on emotional breakdown. I wouldn't know, because I'd never had one before. But it all sank in. The reality was that my marriage was over. The Cass, who had meant so much to me, that had served as my motivation and drive to better myself as a man, and as a fighter, had betrayed me in the worst way a woman can betray a man. I remember what Uncle Louis said before he left the cage, and I needed to hear a reassuring voice, so I called him. He picked up on the first ring and immediately asked, "Where are you, Tab? You all right? I swung by your complex an hour ago and you weren't there." Called Jared and he said you left the event center by yourself. I hadn't even realized 3 hours had passed since I left. I reassured him I was okay. Pulled over on a side street 3 miles from my apartment, lamenting the destruction of my marriage. Uncle Louis gave me sage advice as only he could, and all warned me that when he passed by, he saw Cass' car in her parking spot, which meant she was home. I thanked him for all of his help and his words of wisdom, and told him I'd text him when I was home. Sure enough, when I pulled into my parking space, Cass' car was sitting in hers. Did she come straight home after the fight? Did she spend time with Jared before doing so? Those are just some of the thoughts boiling in my head as I made my way to the apartment. As I reached the door, I could hear 2 voices behind the door, both females. One was unmistakably Cass, the other I could only assume was her best friend and co-work, Josefina. Josie, for short. Part of me wanted to turn around and just go, but that part lost as badly as Jared did earlier. This was my apartment. It had been mine since before Cass and I even started dating. If anyone was getting out, it was her. The voices on the other side of the door hushed as my keys jingled opening the door. When I stepped in, a chill shot down my spine as Cass and Josie were sitting on the couch. Cass couldn't even bring herself to look me in the eye, but Josie did. In a voice that almost sounded like a whisper, Josie spoke, breaking the silence. "Tab, please." Cass fucked up. She knows she did. There's no excuse for it, but divorce. So suddenly. Without even giving her a chance to explain. I cut her attempt at asking more questions with one of my own. One that broke down whatever potential defenses she may have had. "Did you know?" She stammered in her response, saying, "Huh." Coining a phrase my dear OL grandpa would say when I feigned ignorance with that reply, I retorted sternly, "If you can, you can hear, did you know?" Cass' light sobs grew louder as I raised my voice, which pretty much gave me the answer. Cass and Josie have been friends long before I was in the picture, most like since back when Cass was dating Jared. So of course, she'd be complicit in Cass' infidelity. I stared daggers into Josie, and not long after she too couldn't meet my gaze. I dunno, I guess she sensed things slipping further out of her control, because it'd be Cass to speak up next. Tab, please. I made a horrible mistake. I let my emotions get the better of me, and old feelings for Jared that I never dealt with from how we broke up came back when he reached out to me, and I cut her off immediately by saying, a mistake. A mistake is accidentally picking up a coffee mug on the side and not by the handle when it's got hot liquid in it. A mistake is going to the market to buy food, getting to checkout and realizing you left your wallet at home. Wanna know what's not a mistake? Going behind your husband's back and fucking your ex-boyfriend, who if I recall broke up with you when he thought he was about to hit the big time, for 8 fucking months. By the end of my statement, she not only realized the gravity of the situation, but exactly how much I knew. If she had intent to try that "it only happened once" play, it got knocked out worse than Jared did. This time her sobs were inconsolable. The type of ugly cry you make when your impending doom is set in stone. Josie tried to chime in saying, Tab, you know she loves you and only you. Please, you can get through this. Just give her a chance. She'll make it up to you. We'll make it up to you. I know it was wrong, but she's like a sister to me, and I know what Jared did to her firsthand. She needed to get him out of her system. Cass added, you were never supposed to know. I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted to give Jared a taste of what he walked away from, then flaunt you in front of him to make him regret breaking my heart. I cut her off again. So what? You're still my girl until I say otherwise. The deer in headlights look in her eyes revealed even deeper how far in the hole she dug herself she was. I continued. So, you had an 8-month affair with the guy who broke your heart and dumped you because thought he was going to move to greener pastures, lying to me in the process, out of sick need for revenge. Sweetie, you need mental help. No human being in their right sense of mind does that unless they are out of their damned mind. I thought I knew you, Cass. Clearly, I was dead wrong. As dead wrong as you are thinking there is any way we can get through this, or that I'll ever forgive you. By this point, both women had tears in their eyes. If their plan was to tag team me into slowing down or canceling the divorce, it failed categorically. Baby, please. I don't want a divorce. I love you. Please. Don't do this. Don't end what we have because of my stupidity. I'll go get counseling. I'll delete my social media. I'll give you access to everything. I'll wear one of those GPS ankle bracelets inmates do so you always know where I am. Please baby, don't throw me away. Cass was on her knees now, groveling for forgiveness. Hours ago, this sight would have broken me. But indifference is all I felt for her. They say the true opposite of love is indifference, and every iota of love I had for her vanished. I replied, Cassandra, you threw us away the moment you entertained the attention of another man, let alone that man. You had an 8-month affair with him thanks to your own vanity and sickening need for validation and revenge. We have nothing more to say without lawyers present. So get off your knees, go into my bedroom, pack up whatever shit you need and get out. Those words made Josie jump out of her chair and shout, you can't just kick her out. She lives here too. I looked to her and retorted, this apartment is in my name. It's been mine since before I met your traitor's friend. And she's now unwelcomed here. So she can either leave on her own or I can get NYPD involved. Normally this kind of tactic ends disastrously for men, but it's literally my apartment. Cass' name wasn't even on the lease. I convinced her it wasn't necessary since by the time the lease was up, we'd be in the process of moving into a bigger place, since starting a family was at point on the cards. Obviously, things have changed. Sobbing, Cass and Josie stood up and headed towards my bedroom. I followed soon after and stood in the doorway as they both loaded her suitcases with as much as they could fit, which wasn't nearly enough. I'd say almost 70% of our collective closet and drawer space was Cass stuff. She'd clearly need multiple trips to get all of her shit. When I saw they were nearing completion of the task, I headed back into the kitchen, grabbed me a bottle of water and sat at the island. Sniffling and sobbing still, I watched as they dragged 3 large suitcases behind them as they headed for the door. As she passed me, in a meek and timid voice, Cass muttered the words, I'm sorry, Tab. I'll make this up to you. I simply responded with one word, lawyer, and took another sip of my water. She burst into tears again and they hurried out of the door. I got up, closed and locked the door behind them. I let out a deep sigh as I text Uncle Louis a short message, "I'm home." "She's gone." He immediately responded texting back, "Get some rest, Tab. No alcohol. I'll swing by in the morning." I crashed on the couch that night. I know they'd never made it to the point where they'd attempt fucking in my bed, but the energy of the room still radiated Cassandra. There were barely aspects in this apartment I'd called home the last 6 years that didn't have her signature on it. Married guys know how it is. Your girl moves in and the space that was once your bachelor pad becomes her canvas. She does everything and everything to erase the fact that you were once single from it. And we men let it happen. It's like a rite of passage for young married couples. It's kind of symbolic that the couch was one of the last vestiges of my life before Cass that remained. It belonged to my dearly departed father, who died when I was 4. He, like Uncle Louis, was NYPD. He was gunned down in a robbery attempt in Red Hook, Brooklyn. Saved the lives of 8 people. My dad wasn't a high-profile detective, he was a simple beat cop. But that night he took out 4 gangbangers trying to rob a bodega. There were 5 of them. He never saw the last one from what I'm told. The couch holds significance to me because, well, I was born on this couch. My mom never got rid of it, especially after his passing. And when I moved out on my own, she gave it to me, as it's one of the last existing mementos of him. I slept like a baby. Whatever anxiety, pain, and anger existed in me, it seemed got let out in my outburst on the side of the road. Tomorrow was going to be a busy day indeed. The day I officially begin the process of erasing Cass from my life. But there was still an issue I knew was going to need clearing up. The fallout of the fight with Jared Emon. And yes, it ended up being exactly the kind of shit show you would have expected. Story 2, my wife cheated on me with her gay best friend. Me and my wife Sarah had been married for 5 years, and we were seen as the perfect couple by our family and friends. We had met in college, fallen in love, and after graduation, we had gotten married. I am a successful businessman, and Sarah is a schoolteacher. We had a beautiful home, great friends, and a loving family. But I was about to discover that my perfect life was anything but. It all started with Sarah's best friend, Jason. Jason was gay, or at least that's what he had always told everyone. He had been Sarah's friend since high school, and they had remained close ever since. I always found it strange that Sarah had such a close relationship with the gay men, but I never thought anything of it. That was until I came home from work early one day and found Sarah and Jason in their bedroom. At first, I was confused. What was Jason doing in our bedroom? But then I saw the look on Sarah's face, and I knew. I knew that my wife had been cheating on me with her supposedly gay best friend. I was devastated. I had never imagined that Sarah would cheat on him, let alone with another man, and especially not with someone who was supposed to be gay. I confronted Sarah about what I had seen, but she denied everything. She told me that I was imagining things, that Jason was just a friend, and that there was nothing going on between them. But I wasn't convinced. I had seen the way they had looked at each other, the way they had touched each other. I knew that something was going on, and I couldn't just let it go. Over the next few weeks, I tried to get to the bottom of what was going on between Sarah and Jason. I followed them, I listened in on their conversations, and I even hired a private investigator. And what I discovered was shocking. Sarah and Jason had been having an affair for months. They had been sneaking around behind my back, lying to me, and betraying my trust. I didn't know what to do. I loved Sarah, but I couldn't forgive her for what she had done. I confronted her again, and this time she admitted everything. She told me that she had fallen in love with Jason, that she didn't mean to hurt me, and that she was sorry. But I couldn't just forgive her like that. I needed time to think. As me and Sarah struggled to work through their problems, Jason remained in the picture, adding to the tension between them. I didn't understand how Jason could have lied about his sexuality and betrayed our trust. As time passed, me and Sarah eventually decided to separate. I couldn't trust Sarah anymore, and Sarah needed time to figure out her feelings for Jason. The divorce was difficult, but it was necessary for both of us to move on and start anew. It wasn't until several months later that I learned the truth about Jason. He had never been gay. He had only told Sarah that to get closer to her, knowing that she would never cheat on her husband with a straight man. I met up with my old buddy Russell from high school. He served in the Navy for 4 years until he was kicked out due to his anger issues and aggressive behavior. We went out for drinks and my emotions got the best of me. I was super drunk, but I apparently had somehow convinced Russell to hunt down Sarah and Jason. Little did I know Russell would take things too far. Sarah and Jason were still together, but Russell had found Jason's address on a public website. One day Russell went to John's house and waited until they left. Russell decided to follow them, where they ended up going to a remote hiking trail that wasn't too popular. Once Sarah and Jason had started their hike, Russell had followed them until they were in a secluded area and ran up to Jason and jabbed his throat. Sarah screamed as Jason was attempting to stop his jugular from bleeding. But seconds later Jason lost consciousness and ended up dying. Russell then jabbed the knife into Sarah's eyeball, killing her instantly. Russell hid the bodies deep in the forest, which was heavily populated with mountain lions. He purposely left the bodies in a place with a high frequency of mountain lion sightings. 1 week later there were missing people reports on both Jason and Sarah. Sarah's parents were freaking out and even called me, but I had no clue on the whereabouts. The next day Russell came to my place and told me everything. I was shocked and didn't know what to say. Russell told me not to worry and that it was just karma serving justice for what Sarah and Jason had done. He said they destroyed my life, so why should they get to live theirs? It's been 3 years since their deaths and Russell still hasn't been caught. I assume a big reason is because the mountain lions most likely consumed the dead bodies by now. I have no idea what to do now though, as I've now happily dating my new GF Madison for 2 years. I haven't told her anything about my past with Sarah or Jason and don't plan on ever telling her. What should I do? Should I snitch on Russell to the police or stay quiet about their deaths and agree with what Russell said about karma serving justice? Story 3. Should I take nuclear measures upon uncovering that my wife engaged in an affair using my son's iPad? I'll get straight to the point, but I, M29 from UK, have been with my wife, F29 from UK, have been together for 13 years since college days but have been married for 5 years. We have a 9-year-old son and 2 years ago, my wife bought him an iPad. Little did I know that device would cause the end of my marriage. My wife has never been overly attached or secretive about her messages when I'm around. We've shared our passwords as a sign of trust, so I never had any reason to suspect her of cheating. My son asked me to buy him Minecraft, so I said sure, so I went onto App Store and in the Today tab, there was section called iPad Essentials and Snapchat was there, and I thought it was strange for an 8-year-old to have Snapchat. I asked my son why he has Snapchat, however he didn't know what Snapchat is. Maybe he accidentally downloaded it. Curiosity struck me, so I opened Snapchat, and I think you can guess the rest. My wife made a Snapchat account which is 1.5 years old on my son's iPad and had one guy added who we will call him J Asshole because it rhymes with his actual name. Regrettably, I lack concrete evidence of their explicit communication. All I have evidence is J Asshole on my son's iPad, plus the fact that Snapchat's messages and images vanish within 24 hours. Contemplating the notion of impersonating my wife and reaching out to J Asshole on Snapchat briefly crossed my mind. However, I swiftly discarded the idea, wary that my wife might have J Asshole listed in her contacts on her iPhone. Such an action could potentially raise suspicion on why she would be simultaneously messaging him from 2 separate devices. Despite this, I opted to leave the Snapchat app and remove any traces that I opened it. Moving forward, I downloaded Minecraft onto my son's iPad. Following that, I took a moment to peruse my wife's Instagram, searching for any traces of connection with J Asshole, but found none. However, a different story unfolded on Facebook, where I uncovered that she indeed followed him. Thankfully, his profile was publicly accessible, affording me a glimpse into his life and how it can assist my nuclear option. Notably, his online presence featured images suggestive of a wife and 2 children. Furthermore, it appeared that his primary hobby revolved around hiking, evident from the catalog of pictures captured amidst his various hikes. LMAO. In case I wanted to go nuclear, I found his wife and his parents' Facebook profiles. So Reddit people, I need help for an endgame plan. Do I go completely nuclear and be a complete asshole and try and ruin my wife and J Asshole life by exposing them to everyone? I studied sociology and psychology for A-levels years ago and I don't want to create a toxic environment for my son, so what should be done? Edit. A user recommended me to search Snapchat memories and there is the evidence I desperately needed. My wife sending nude pics to J Asshole. I am genuinely disgusted that my son could have accidentally came across these pictures, and I've practically finished with this marriage. I will 100% be going scorched earth. I continue with this update. I will like to clarify 2 minor points. Firstly, I'm from the UK and of course the educational system isn't the same as the US educational system. Some Americans was confused as to why I spent 2 years in college, and to simply put it, college in the UK is basically high school in the US. You spend 2 years in college before deciding whether you want to go into employment, do an apprenticeship or go university. The world isn't resolved around the US. Secondly, a Reddit user asked why I didn't show any kind of heartbreak or upset, and to answer this question, I felt more anger, hence why I want to do a nuclear approach. However, I need to plan ahead. Moving on to the update, following a recommendation from a Reddit user, I decided to view my son's screen time activity. Upon review, I discovered that, on average, she spent approximately 20 minutes per day on Snapchat, according to data available up to March 4th. However, it's worth noting that screen time statistics may not be 100% accurate. Another Reddit user recommended that I acquire the services of a private investigator, and thus, I followed through with their suggestion. Although it entails a significant financial investment, I am hopeful that the investigator will provide vital evidence to prove my wife's infidelity, which I intend to present to legal counsel upon initiating divorce proceedings. Also, it's worth noting that UK justice system doesn't really care about infidelity when it comes to divorce. However, I want primary custody of my son, so adultery will be considered. Finally, another user told me to see if J asshole on my wife contacts on her phone, but unfortunately I haven't had the time to go through her phone. In preparation, I've drafted 2 plans which I could use against my wife. Plan 1, going fully nuclear, showing evidence to everyone of my wife infidelity, even showing proof of J asshole infidelity to his family. Also worth noting, regardless of which plan I choose, I will tell J asshole wife the truth, as he deserved to know what kind of homewrecker her husband is, and serving divorce paper right in her face. Plan 2, threatening to go nuclear, with hopefully the vital evidence provided by private investigator. I can threaten my wife with the evidence I've obtained and persuade her to not contest the divorce and let me have full or primary custody, otherwise I will go scorched earth. Of course these are drafts, but let me know if you have any advice on how I should proceed with this. This will be a slow and mentally draining process, but I hope to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Hello everyone, you may remember me from my previous posts which I have linked above, and for this update, I will discuss a few minor points before ranting about how my life has been since discovering my wife affair and my mental health struggles. I'd like to acknowledge that while this may be stretching the boundaries of Reddit assistance, for me, these posts serve as a form of cost-free therapy. My experiences with professional therapists have been less than satisfactory, a situation I'll delve into later. However, on Reddit, I found a sense of genuine concern and support from the community, despite the presence of a few trolls. For this, I am sincerely grateful to you all. Now on to the minor points which I will discuss briefly. Firstly, I want primary custody for my son for 2 reasons. Firstly, my wife works more hours than me, as her job is way more demanding than mine, and I take care of my son more. And secondly, I'm horrified by the fact that our nudes was on my son's iPad, so overall I believe he will benefit staying with me. I also never intended on taking my child away from his mother, but nonetheless she caused the family to collapse by failing to keep her legs closed. Secondly, a Reddit user suggested that she could be having an affair with a coworker, so I've arranged a meeting with her colleague who I consider a friend. Thirdly, I've concluded I'm going to take the less nuclear approach, but with a few minor adjustments. Finally, and with significance, I felt inclined to postpone contacting lawyer initially, as I wanted concrete evidence from private investigator. However, upon receiving numerous recommendations from the community, I gave in to their advice and will sought legal counsel. I've come to realize it's key for me to stay several steps ahead of my wife, considering the possibility of her initiating divorce proceedings. I will talk about why I'm not a fan of therapy, and the simple answer is, my therapist didn't care for me at all. During adulthood and childhood, my father cheated on my mother multiple times. Somehow they're still together to this day. Of course, therapy and psychology has advanced since I last had a session, but I just deeply remember explaining my issues to my therapist and she replied in a monotone, "Anything else?" and ended the session. I feel like I'm traumatized by these words. I have rarely expressed my issues to people until I made this Reddit post, and from my experience, thus the advice I've been given, I feel like unqualified Reddit users have treated me better than actual therapists, which sounds crazy to say. Now on to how life has been for me. Honestly, I've been struggling to hide my frustration and disgust. Yesterday we had intimacy and intercourse because I've been accepting her demands. She knows I would never turn down intimacy, and I genuinely felt sick. I have no evidence my wife or J asshole affair turned physical, but the mere concept of my wife opening her legs to another man frightens. She questioned my peculiar motives, but I just joked that my Johnny isn't working and she laughed. We left it at that, but I genuinely felt humiliated, and I think I'm a massive asshole for forcing myself to do this act. My wife could be laughing about this situation to J asshole, and I'm just struggling to accept what life has become. I've also been overthinking, what if my son isn't mine? What if this affair has been going on for quite and I've been too oblivious to recognize the red flags because I firmly held onto the idea that my marriage had no flaws. Story 4, Ada for asking my wife to cut ties with her affair partner while I'm there to witness it. So, for some context, I, M41 and my wife F40, have been together for 18 years. Married for 11 years. We have had our ups and downs, but not a lot of fighting or arguing. For years into our marriage, I was working a very tiring job 50 to 60 hours a week, and she was working from home and raising out children. I know it was a very stressful time for her doing both jobs, and I wasn't around that much, which killed me to miss out on being with my family a lot during this time. After some time, I noticed she was getting distant and not talking to me very much. So I decided to do some digging because I had a gut feeling. Now we were both gamers, and we aged 2 different video games all the time and had 2 friends that aged the same. So while she was working from home, she was also playing games with both of them. First guy I'll call Dave. The other guy will call him Dan. So, while she was in the shower, she left her phone on the bed, and I unlocked it and looked around. I found she had SC installed, so I opened it. There, I was greeted with a pic of Dave's male appendage. I confronted her with this and asked, WTF is going okay? She broke down in tears, saying she didn't know how it got that far, and he was there since I wasn't because of me working all the time to support our family. This all happened on my B-day as well, and we were about to go out for dinner. Well, dinner sucked as you can imagine. Well, I asked if she replied with her own pics as well, since she never sent me pics like that. She said no, she didn't. And I said, well, this needs to stop now or we are done. She ended it. But later, I stopped a little more, and since it was an Apple phone, it linked up with the Apple Pad. And there was the picture she took and sent him. I confronted her about this, and she said yes, she sent it and felt bad about it. And I made sure to tell her to stop ASAP. She did. And since this happened, I became more paranoid she was still doing it, and onto the work, I couldn't take it anymore. I quit my job, we lost the house and cars and everything bankrupt in a few short months. So we had to move. We moved back home to a place my friend offered to sell us pay as we go, so we had a ace to live. After some time, she continued not to do much with me and still did stuff with online friends, such as gaming and hanging out and talking on Discord. So, I never really built the trust back with me. I confronted her about this a few times, but nothing happened. I later found out that she had feelings for Dan and even told him and a mutual friend on Discord that she might be falling in love with him. I found this out much later on. So I got a good job opportunity to move north to a new state. So we moved and I started work. I traveled a lot because the building wasn't built but was good for training for the job. Still being paranoid about her because she didn't build the trust up, we separated in the place we lived in. She at one end of the house and me at the other. This went on for about 7 months or so. And she was talking with Dan way too much. Which I did voice my concerns about. Well, after 7 months, she emailed me saying she is leaving and moved out. For months we were not living together and her friend Dan, who she spent more time with than anyone else in the family, ghosted her. She was available, and he decided not to talk to her anymore. So the guy she left me for is no longer in the picture, and will we talk and get back together? And I moved back in with her. Skip forward again 7 to 8 months, our marriage is on the rocks again. She says because of my smoking and I was playing a tabletop game too much, that she gave up on us and was depressed all the time. Asked me to move out. She said after my prying a little to get some info. She was talking to a guy, who I will name Richard. So we are separated, and I'm trying my hardest to keep our marriage alive. We did couples coinciding. Sometimes, we would get in heated arguments where I ended up yelling at her that she is doing wrong, and this guy is not meant for her and is only trying to get laid. Well done with couples coinciding, and I got a therapist for my self-esteem issues as well. And that therapy went well for me. Can't say the same for couples therapy. During this time we are looking AF options for vehicles because she currently had 2 in her name, one which I was co-signed on with her because she wanted a new vehicle because the old one reminded her of Dan and wanted to move on from that. So, I loca idiot I traded in my car and co-signed to get a truck for her. Now we separated, and she can't afford both. And I got a beater truck to save money. She wants to trade both in for a brand new electric car because she was overhead $18,000 and $1,500 a month in loan payments and insurance. So co-signed for an electric car lease. As soon as she got it, she wanted a divorce. And voiced this during the couple's therapy. During the trade-in period and signing, she insinuated that our marriage would work but change after getting the car. So after 6 months of separation she is missing me and we have been friendly with each other for a few days. And I have to know, I already knew but wanted confirmation. I asked if you slept with that Richard. She replied, you really want to know? And I said yes, I already know, just want you to admit it. She said yes, she did. I asked how many times. She said she didn't know, she didn't keep track. Was it worth it? She said no. I asked if you used a condom. She said no. So now I need to FET test it. Because Richard is an 33-year-old truck driver. I'm sure he has seen a few lot lizards. She replied to that with, well, if it makes you feel better, your manhood is a lot bigger than his. In a way it did and also didn't make me feel better, so I said if she wants to try to make this marriage work she needs to cut co-tactics with him and start working on us. Before this, maybe 2 weeks, I visited a lawyer and started the divorce process, and she is aware of this as well. We both agreed to put divorce on hold for now and see if we can fix this. But I told her she needs to cut contact with him, tell him over the phone and I wasn't to be present at the time to make sure it happened, then block him everywhere that he could contact her, and this has to happen before the end of the week. Right now, that is where we are at. She is giving pushback about cutting contact with him because she says I am forcing her to do it rather than let her do it on her own. I said it needs to be done ASAP, and I want to be there. I am adamant about that. I will be working on being if I can look past the cheating on me at the time as well. Sorry for jumping around there a little, just stuff I remembered that is important and decided to find a spot to add it in. So, Ada for asking her to cut all contact with her affair partner while I am present when she does it. Update. I know it has been only 1 day, but I'm sure you all would like to hear this. The divorce is on. Started the paperwork. She texted me and said only wanted me for sex and nothing more. I talked on the phone with her trying to understand her logic, and by the end of it I said fuck it, I tried to look past you cheating on me with someone but I can't and I won't. You had an affair, and I can't ignore it. Fuck it, I'm done, I will start the paperwork and just be done with you. Then called her a hole and hung up the phone. So paperwork is started for a much needed divorce. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and hit that subscribe button to follow Cheating Love Stories for more amazing videos. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next one.